Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you kindly for stopping by. I'm always grateful. Let me start with some macro thoughts about the bond market. Total annualized returns for bonds in 2016 have been stellar. The headline is Bonds Gone Wild, Abandoned Savers. And this is an important point, with these negative rates. You can hardly call the bond market a place for widows and orphans, which was what it was originally called. I took this photograph of the river. We were at the Oxbow point of the Mara River at the Fairmont, and this was a photograph of it. And I said, "Good morning, world," from a bend in the river, in the Mara Fairmont River. And I was referring to a book by V.S. Naipaul of the same name. Going home at night, it was often that I was on the river at night. I never liked it. I never felt in control. In the darkness of river and forest, you could be sure only of what you could see, and even on a moonlit night, you couldn't see much. When you made a noise, dipped a paddle in the water, you heard yourself as though you were another person. The river and the forest were like presences, and much more powerful than you. You felt unprotected, an intruder. You felt the land taking you back to something that was familiar, something you had known at some time, but had forgotten or ignored, but which was always there. You felt the land taking you back to what was there 100 years ago, to what had been there always. It's a fantastic book. It's talking about an Indian shopkeeper perched in a place called Kisangani in the DRC. I am writing my article from the Fairmont Mara, which is perched on the Mara River, was how I began my weekend article, and where the soundtrack includes bursts of hippopotami snorting, and at night the eerily human sound of tree hyraxes. Have a look at this photograph of hippos just outside our tent, third largest land mammal, and apparently 150,000 in the Mara River. We went looking to see the crossing, the famous crossing, what's called the eighth wonder of the world, the wildebeest, and we actually went further away from where the main crossing point is, the very famous one, to a place called Double Cross. And you'll notice from this photograph the wildebeest thought about crossing at this point, went down to the water and then bailed. And I sort of captured the bailing moment, I thought. The Mara remains, of course, our premier tourism destination. Have a look at this photograph of buffaloes. There were a lot of buffaloes around. And have a look at this bush breakfast gig. That was really quite splendid. We were sitting in this wide open flat expanse with zebras and wildebeest around us. It really was very, very beautiful. And then also the bar, which is a feature which was built many years ago, because the Fairmont Mara was in fact started by Tiny Rowland and his Longrow group. And I said, if the Fairmont Mara is a proxy, and then in brackets, in fact, I do not think it is, then tourism is back and on a crest of a wave. We have so many wonderful places to visit in Kenya, and I find looking at the shape-shifting landscape incredibly therapeutic and sensual. It metaphorically washes away the weak and allows you to look at things as if it were a clean slate. Have a look at this photograph of avocado, which is probably the best avocado I've ever tasted. They have an organic garden there. From there it took me to Marshall McLuhan. There are no passengers on spaceship Earth. We are all crew. And then I like this photograph by David Yarrow, Planet Earth, released earlier this year. Chef Stephen Harris describes his restaurant, The Sportsman, as a grotty seaside pub. It's just been named the UK's best restaurant in the National Restaurant Awards. It talking wood-stable oysters poached with rhubarb and seaweed, or with pickled cucumber and arugula caviar. Rock oysters come with hot chorizo. Sounds tasty. Put up a photograph of a dish of wild garlic velouté and radish cod. Political reflections, let's get serious. The Hague Tribunal, which admittedly the Chinese had been rejecting from the very beginning, regarding the South China Sea dispute, they've found that China has no legal basis for its 9-line claims. South China Sea claims dashed by Hague Court ruling. The ruling is a rebuff to years of Chinese activity in the waterway. Under President Xi Jinping, China has built a web of artificial islands with runways and lighthouses. It has shooed away planes and ships from other nations, and its coast guard has clashed with fishing boats. At the heart of Xi's actions is a bid to restore China to great power status and push back against decades of US influence. There was no evidence that China has historically exercised exclusive control over the waters or their resources, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague said Tuesday in a statement. The ruling went beyond what analysts had expected and prompted an immediate response from Beijing. The ruling is as bad as possible, Hugh Xing, editor-in-chief of the Communist Party-run Global Times, wrote. This is the worst, the most extreme version of several possible scenarios. China's military said it would firmly protect its maritime rights and interests. The award is null and void and has no binding force, the Foreign Ministry said in a statement. The court found that Scarborough Shoal doesn't generate a 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. Mischief Reef, Second Thomas Shoal, and Subi Reef were submerged high tide in their natural condition and don't generate a 12 nautical mile territorial sea. Johnson Reef, Quatorn Reef, and Fiery Cross Reef, on which China has completed a 3-kilometer airstrip, are high tide features that generate a territorial sea, but not an EEZ. Taiwan-held Itu Aba is also a high tide feature and doesn't generate an EEZ. The court found China caused severe harm to the environment with its island building and breached UNCLOS regulations by harassing Philippine vessels. I concluded by saying, what happens next? Will the US now empower its allies to fend off China? Or will the Chinese just continue with this policy of incrementally pushing the envelope? The South China Sea is the transit point for 1/3 of the world's seaborne oil trade and 1/2 of LNG. This is via Javier Blas. Theresa May takes office today. Her most watched act as UK Prime Minister will be naming a Brexit czar. Extricating the UK from the European Union will require finesse and force, and whoever gets the job will need to be unswervingly loyal to the new leader, and also been a backer of the Leave campaign. The formation of a new Brexit department with the Secretary of State at its helm will be one of May's first announcements, her office said late Tuesday. And she certainly looks as if she's in charge, and I think that's why the pound has improved. After looking as if there was nobody in charge, suddenly you got movement. The leader of Somalia's al-Shabaab jihadist group, Ahmed Diriye, described Turkey as the enemy of the nation and accused foreign peacekeeping forces of plundering the country in an audio message. Somalia is under the occupation of invading Christian crusaders. The so-called international community deceived the Somali society to accept that the Ethiopian and other AMISOM forces are peacekeepers, while their aim is to conquer Somali territories in order to plunder its resources. The Turkish government is the enemy of the nation. Today, Somalia's economy is in total collapse because of their intervention. Turkey has invaded this country economically. They have taken control of the Somali economy. And and all they want is to keep the nation in poverty, he said. It's interesting that he's gone so aggressively against Turkey, because Recep Tayyip Erdogan visited Mogadishu in June, inking several development deals and opening one of the largest Turkish embassies in the world. I'll put up a photograph of him attending an opening ceremony of that very embassy. The 21st century is going to be a war between nationalism and globalism, Matthew Heimbach, a white supremacist. US stocks have soared to a record high, US bond yields at a record low. This now huge divergence opened up in 2011. US 10-year yields posted their biggest two-day increase since December 2015. It's interesting. Yen rebounding from touching just below 105. We're at 104.26 right now. And there's a lot of talk of whether there's going to be helicopter money. However, Yoshida Suga told reporters it's not true that the government was considering so-called helicopter money. The helicopter comment is what's panicking the market right now. Stopped out a lot of dollar longs, I think. Japanese shares, of course, have soared and recouped Brexit losses. Have a look at this, which correlates the yen and the Nikkei. Another day, another record. Dow Jones closes at a record. Top previous record close of 18,312 was on May 19th, 2015. Let's move on to the currency markets. Euro dollar 110.60, dollar index 96.41, Japanese yen 104.26, Swiss 0.9887. The pound, which got above 133 to 133.40, is 132.95. And I've been left thinking whether that print at 127.99 was it, and it was an incredible opportunity. But even now, one can chase it, I suppose, as we normalize. Aussie 0.7602, India rupee 67.145, South Korean won 11.4621, the Real 329.61. The Real has been strong. Egyptian pound, they're expecting devaluation in the rand. Couldn't get through key range resistance at 14.20. Sterling up and up a 1 month chart, 132.93 trading last. On balance, I'm of the view it's going higher. Commodity markets, gold, we're trading at 13.41. Crude oil in New York at 46.84. Gold has come off as appetite for risk increased, but I'm sure it'll come back pretty sharply any moment. Have a look at African currency performance versus the dollar year to date. Pretty interesting. Of course, the Somali shilling is an outlier. Moshi Katumbi, who's a candidate to be president, said on Monday he was poisoned as part of a government plot to kill him. In an interview with the Associated Press, Katumbi said he was roughed up by police in May, who injected him with an unknown substance outside a courthouse in the city of Lubumbashi. Their plan was to kill me, he said, because they are scared about my popularity. Katumbi said the directions came from the highest levels of Congo's government, but he did not provide details about whom he specifically believes was responsible. Katumbi hadn't discussed the circumstances of his illness. He told the AP that he needed oxygen for a week to help him breathe. The substance caused a blood infection. Pledged to release laboratory results when tests are complete. I'm going to show everyone, to tell them what is going on in the Congo. This is not any more politics. 6th of June, I talked about how the birthday boy, President Kabila, who is constitutionally barred from running for the third term, and how Katumbi had set out his stall and was proving a formidable adversary. Numbers were building, and Katumbi must have been thinking this might just turn into a tsunami. But of course, so far, President Kabila executed the coup de grace, which was to remove him from the country entirely. Interesting piece in Quartz Africa, a ruthless general called King Paul may be behind South Sudan's recent conflict. When fighting broke out between the bodyguards of South Sudan's president and vice president on July 8, just as the two were meeting to discuss diffusing tensions, neither leader was able to explain why. 2 days later, almost 300 people, including soldiers, civilians, UN peacekeepers, have been killed in the capital of Juba. Both President Kiir and Vice President Riek Machar blame each other for instigating the violence. Their ignorance and confusion is a sign that neither leader has any real influence over their rival factions. Kiir has been increasingly seen as a lame duck president. Machar, Kiir's former vice president turned rebel leader, also lacks resources to command his forces, a shaky coalition of Kiir defectors and local militias. Between the collapse of oil prices and the destruction they themselves wrought in the civil war, South Sudan is so destitute that there are no resources which the country's rulers might employ to bring their followers to heel. Then this report is saying the real force behind the last few days of violence, according to South Sudan expert Clemens Pino from the University of Indiana, may be the feared military general Paul Malong, head of the Sudan People's Liberation Army and former governor of northern Bahr el Ghazal, a state in the northwest. Malong, known as King Paul among his supporters, has a vast patronage network, cemented by dozens of marriages. He has between 45 and 87 wives. Malong has long been thought to be the real base of power in Juba. Some say that President Kiir cannot openly challenge his general and is interested in seizing power over the government for himself. But the problem is these folks only understand war. It's just a disaster. Killings forced Africa's biggest African companies to close in South Sudan, biggest banks, insurers, Old Mutual, Standard Bank, talking about KCB as well. KCB has been forced to cut back on branch operations in South Sudan and has moved all staff to safety. South African oil share up 3.66% this year. Dollar rand, I think, has been repelled by 14.20, and therefore I expect it to back up. I expect the rand to sell off. Egyptian EGX30 up 6.44%. IMF says Nigeria's economy will probably contract this year. If growth falls to 0%, then that's a huge gap the country has to fill. And I wrote about this on the 8th of February when I said Nigeria, the biggest economy in sub-Saharan Africa, will surely contract in 2016. The Nigerian oil share is up 0.75% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index is down 10.45% this year. Look at this chart of the Mozambique 10-year Eurobond. It's a price chart. Yes, it is probably the highest yielding bond in the world after Venezuela. And that bond is telling you a story of complete loss of faith in Mozambique. And 776 days ago, I was in Mozambique for an Africa Rising conference, and I took a poster. Contrast that poster with the bond price. Narendra Modi tweeted glimpses from the ceremonial welcome in Nairobi. Let me put up a chart of the Kenya 10-year dollar-euro bond, which has rallied sharply, actually is back below 8%. Kenya Airways has received 10 billion shillings from the National Treasury, which is on lending a loan received from China's Afrexim Bank. Disconnect with managers behind millennials' job hop. This was the function I attended yesterday, the Deloitte function. Kenyan companies are unable to attract and retain qualified young talent due to a widening disconnect between what employers and the millennials, young employees born after 1980, perceive to be a favourable working environment. This new research by Deloitte warns that a majority of Kenyan companies are not achieving their full potential as young, resentful employees who feel isolated from the workplace quit in droves soon after employment. Businesses need to up their ante to meet the demands of this rapidly evolving business ecosystem by creating a new management model, developing a younger and increasingly inclusive leadership structure. That's Deloitte again. According to the Deloitte East Africa CEO Sami Onyango, the need for employers to move with speed in engaging their young employees is urgent, as 70% of tomorrow's employees will be millennials. Companies which fails to do so will face productivity challenges. As a leader, you need to begin with having a clear mission that resonates with the millennials, and then leverage on their love for novelty to optimize productivity for the short duration that millennials will be in your organization. I was speaking at the event, and I said that, one of the first things I do if I'm about to interview somebody is take a look at their social media and see what they're thinking. Leadership pipelines in Kenya are weak. This was one of the conclusions from Debbie Hollis. She says we are seeing more and more so-called black swan events, and I'd have to agree with her. John Aglenby tweeted me and said he's right to the FT. Wouldn't that mean they're not black swan events since they're no longer so unusual? And I said Debbie should have said, what were once black swan events but are now so frequent we call them white swans. Kenya shilling 101.25, that's been very, very steady. Nairobi All Share closed at a 1st of February 2016 low. It's down 4.69% this year. NSE 20 slumped to a 50-month low. That's down 10.42% so far this year. Thanks for stopping by. I'm always grateful.